Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to St. Paul's. I am Charlie Dupree. I'm the rector here, and it's a joy to welcome you back as we begin to unroll things here at St. Paul's and begin our program year. Many of you may know that 4 weeks ago, I tested positive for COVID, and it could have been a lot worse, but it was still pretty nasty. But I think the worst part about it was that it messed around with the preaching schedule, which meant that I had to preach today on this gospel. So I just kind of want to get us all in a headspace for talking about this particular gospel, because it's confusing at best, right? I was on the phone with at least 3 preachers yesterday trying to figure out what we were going to do with this gospel. But I do believe there is something to be learned. I believe that there is good news in it. And I do believe that, of course, God is continuing to speak to us, as always, through Scripture. So I want to spend some time going through this passage with you today, and maybe even share some of the gleanings that I heard this morning at our Bible study, continued insights into helping to make this make sense. All right, so Jesus is talking to his disciples here, right? You can follow along if you want. I'm going to just kind of move us through some of the more significant parts, or at least the parts that caught my attention. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's telling them a story. Remember, this is a story, right? There was a rich man, and the rich man had a manager, and charges were brought to him that the manager was squandering his property. Now, that word squandering there might trigger something for you, because if you notice, we're in Luke chapter 16 at the very beginning. And in Luke 15, what do we hear? Prodigal son, right. We hear those stories about the 3 lost items, the sheep, the coin, and the child. And what did that son do? Squandered his father's property in dissolute living and went away, right? Squandered it. So there's some connections here. So it sounds like Jesus is beginning to continue in that theme of teaching about what it means to live in alignment with God. All right, so more to come on that. So the rich man summons the manager and says, "What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management. Go out there. I want to know what's going on. So bring back the books." And then the manager has a little conversation with himself. Right? The manager's like, what am I going to do now? Now that my master has taken the position away from me, and get this, he says, "I'm not strong enough to dig." I hear that. "And I am ashamed to beg." Right? So there's some physical limitations there. And there's also some pride happening there. Now, what this may say to you, as it says to me, is that this person may be up there in years, especially back in that day. And the options for employment were not that great. And so it makes me wonder if this person, as someone said in Bible study this morning, isn't terrified because he's about to lose his job, right? I think there are a lot of situations out in the world today where people are scared that they are expendable, that they are too expensive, they are going to be dismissed, and they don't have a safety net. And it's terrifying. So if you're looking for a common intersection today, there it is. So what does this person decide he needs to do? He needs to get smart. He needs to set up a way for his future to be more secure. And so he goes out there and begins to bring the debtors in. And he says, "Hey, how much do you owe?" Cut it in half. How much do you owe? Cut it in thirds. How much do you owe? And so the manager is being shrewd, wise, prudent, some might say. He is setting up a situation for himself where he will be able to be taken care of down the road. So there's really nothing wrong with that, if you ask me. Is the right word dishonest? I'm not sure. Again, this is stuff for you to talk about over dinner tonight, right? What was he talking about? You don't have, I'm not going to give you any answers, but you can come up with your own. The other thing I notice here is that the manager is not being dishonest with anybody but the owner. He's doing the others a favor, right? And in fact, covenantal law said that it was illegal to charge interest. And so this manager is maybe leveling out the playing field just a little bit for the people out there. All right, so the story goes on, and it turns out that the owner commends the manager for these practices and for doing this. And, you know, that gets really confusing, all of the parts that are in between there. And again, I ask you to read those, talk about it amongst yourselves. If you do come to any scathingly brilliant ideas, send them to me. But I think where the microphone drop moment is, where this makes sense, where the light bulb comes on, and sometimes it doesn't happen until later, looking back, it happens there at the end. Jesus says, no slave can serve two masters. For a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. You cannot serve God and wealth. Again, this is the lifeline moment of the passage to me, because I think what Jesus is doing here is showing us what it looks like to have two figures caught up in a society and in a system where they are pulled away from their center point, where they are pulled away from what is important. God, capital G, or the little g God of wealth and power. And this is the only time that Jesus actually personifies and deifies power and wealth, calling it a little g God. This is also a time when that word serve, you cannot serve. You know, in the church we have deacons, diakonos, and they are servants. Servants like wash your feet, feed the poor, all of that, tend to the sick. But here that verb serve means to be controlled by. The question is, are we controlled by wealth and power, mammon, or are we controlled by God? So that, to me at least, is where this story is taking us. And it asks us that question today as well. Because you know as well as I do that in our current society, there are so many things that seek control over our lives. There are things that want our control. Power and wealth definitely vie for our control. What people think of us, what people are thinking about us, that pulls, that controls us. Sometimes fear controls us. What is our life going to be about? What's next? There are all kinds of things out there trying to control us. And what Jesus is putting front and center is that it is God that is doing the controlling. And these two figures in the story have lost their center. Here at St. Paul's, we're gearing up for another year of ministries. For months, the staff and committees have been putting together programs and services and opportunities for all of us to remember that God is the one who is shaping our identity. It makes me think about a rule of life. How many of you have ever heard of a rule of life, right? Like monastics have a rule of life. And the rule comes from the Latin regula. And it's not so much a code of legislation, but it's a way of regulating and regularizing. It's about shaping our identities. And I like to think that some of the things that we've put together, some of the things that you're going to see at the ministry fair, some of those things are a part of the rule of life that we have built into the rhythms of St. Paul's so that we can all remember what our centerpiece is. And as we developed these ministries and as we developed these patterns, we use that word rhythm very intentionally. Sunday rhythm, weekly rhythm, monthly rhythm, seasonal rhythm. They're all rhythms. And you know what rhythms are? They're not schedules as much as they are a way of connecting to who God has created you to be. Rhythms of sun and moon, rhythms of low tide and high tide, rhythms of leaves changing and falling and growing, rhythms of bulbs blooming, rhythms of planting, rhythms of sowing. We each have a rhythm. And God is involved in it because rhythms are there to cultivate growth. All of the rhythms that we've put into place at St. Paul's are here to cultivate growth and to help you remember what is controlling you and what is trying to control you. So at the very least, when you come to church on Sunday morning, you might get a glimpse of some of those other things that are trying to pull at your attention. Now, folks, I don't use the priest card much. I don't use the I am your rector card much. But today, let me remind you that your spiritual lives are important. And my hope is that this church is a central part of the rhythms of your own spiritual life, so that you may not forget whose you are. May you be blessed. May you be a blessing. May you always be able to tune into and tap into the rhythms of God and the way that God is calling you to be more fully and completely you. And may you always know that God is your anchor. When boats float above the anchor, it's not like they're right there. They move a little bit with the waves and the winds. But there's always the anchor holding the boat and keeping it from drifting away. May this place be your anchor, and may you always know that you're loved. Amen.